Hey, party peeps, coming to you live from the Lithgow residence. I hope that you took the opportunity this past weekend to honor your fathers and to wish them a happy Father's Day and to let them know that you love them. They're a big part of lives, and I hope that you'll reach out to those father figures in your lives and say thanks for all that they do. Um, Today, my story matches Concept 3. Concept 3 has two major pieces, the basic speed law, trying to control your speed, and proper following distance rule. And there's some videos associated with the lesson today. There's a PowerPoint that we want you to navigate through and to take some notes on. There's a quiz today, and we just want you to be able to get a good handle on Concept 3. Concept 3 has some big relevancy, I guess would be a great way to say it. The number one reason for all age groups to die in a car crash is speeding too fast. The number one reason for any age group to get in a car crash is following too close. So if, as a defensive driver, our main goal is to avoid crashes, then it's important to start to look at the statistics and find out why people are crashing. And this isn't the first time we've visited statistics. We've definitely looked at them. In the front page of your state handbook, it lists the top 5 for adults and top 5 for teens, top 5 killers. And we also have the top 5 reasons adults crash and top 5 reasons teenagers crash. And it's interesting to note when you look through that presentation to realize that adults have the same problem as teens, and teens have the same problem as adults, which lends itself to say that we're learning from each other. That if we create habits early in our lives, we're going to still have those habits later, and still putting ourselves at a greater risk behind the wheel. And so this is, today I want to, in my stories, I like to share personal experiences. This one's a tough one for me to share because it brings back some tough memories for me. It was when I was 17 years old. It was my senior year. I played sports in high school, and basketball was my main sport. I was a starting point guard, I think all the way from 5th grade. And I played all the way up through the ranks, and I got to my senior year, and it was kind of a big deal. Our team was going to be excellent, and I was very excited. And so it was November time frame, and I was getting ready for the second day of tryouts. My first day of tryouts went well. My shot was dropping. My specialty was defense, and then as a point guard, obviously to orchestrate the offense and to be the team leader on the court was kind of my role, and I loved that role. And I worked hard in the off season to put myself in a good position for my senior year. And second day of tryouts, one of my best buddies come up and says, "Hey, I need help. I can't get a hold of either of my parents, and I forgot my shoes." Now, if you know anything about basketball, there's really not a lot of equipment. You have clothes on, shorts and a shirt, and then you wear socks and shoes. That's your gear. They provide the basketballs. So he forgot the most critical piece, which is his shoes. And, I always like to arrive early and warm up and run around. By the time practice started, I liked to be sweating already. I was ready to go. But he said, "Can you run me home real quick?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Just wear my other pairs of shoes." "Oh, no, I got to have mine. Come on, it's tryouts. This is a big deal." And I'm like, "Okay, we got some time, so we'll head out." And so I hopped in my car, and my car at the time, my senior year, my parents had got me this kind of like a dot. It's kind of like a Subaru Outback or a Subaru wagon, but it was a Datsun. And it was a nice car. It was very used, had a lot of miles, but it was good. It was a nice car. And so we hopped in that car and we headed out. We were wearing our buckles. We were following the speed limit. We were doing our thing, right? Up until this point in my life, no crashes, no tickets. I felt I was a pretty good driver, pretty respectful, pretty responsible, for the most part. Okay? And so we headed out to his house. We get out to his house, which is about a 15-minute ride across town. And we get to his house, and the game plan is for him to run in, get his shoes, and come back out, because we got to hustle. I still got to get over to the gym and get a sweat on before practice starts. And so I'm waiting. And when you're in a hurry, 5 seconds seems like forever. And it had been, I'd listened to 2 songs on the radio, and I'm like, what in the heck? Where's my buddy? And so I go into his house, and he is sitting at the kitchen table eating a sandwich. And I'm like, "Hey, Mike, what are you doing, man? Like, the game plan. Remember the game plan? We were supposed to hustle back to the school." And he's like, "Yeah, sorry, I was hungry." And I'm like, "Yeah, and by the way, did you make me one?" And he didn't. But he grabs his shoes, we head out, and now we're kind of, seems like a little more urgent and time sensitive. And we hop in. I'm a little flustered. I get out of my pre-driving routine, and I just hop in the car, start the car, back out, and we head out. And we're talking about how awesome this senior year is going to go. And we're heading back on our 15-minute journey back from his house over to the school. And I'd forgotten to put on my seatbelt. I got in a hurry. I was a pretty good seatbelt wearer. I would say probably 98% of the time I was in a buckle. And this time I was not. And I'm heading along, and somebody honks. Nobody's in front of me. There's 2 lanes going each way, so it's called a 2-way 4-lane road. So 2 lanes going east, 2 lanes going west, and yellow divider line. And it actually has a painted island in the middle of the road, which has 2 double yellow lines, so don't go in there, off limits. So I'm on the inside lane, heading east, and so the left lane, and somebody honks that's in the right lane. And so me and my buddy turn around, and we're trying to kind of process, like, who is that? Do you recognize that person? Now, if you remember from our first simulator, how long can we look away from the front view? Maximum of 2 seconds, right? And if you did that on the simulator, waited 2 seconds, it probably docked you and you probably didn't pass. So it had to be quick, right? The idea is to look over and then be back, because obviously in front of you is the most important. And like I said, there was no car in my lane at the time. that we looked over, but we looked over too long. And that was the last thing that I remember. The next thing I knew, my car was stopped and I'd blacked out. I woke up and my car was still running, and I remember reaching up and shutting off the car, and I looked ahead and I had crushed into this car in front of me, who apparently, when the other car honked and my buddy and I looked, they were in the right lane, and they made a quick lane change to the left and stopped in the lane because they were going to head to a pizza place called Godfather's right there. And it was an illegal left turn. You can't go there, but they were there. And had I been looking forward, I would have just simply applied the brakes, stopped behind them, no big deal, right? But I took my attention away from the front view longer than 2 seconds, and in that tiny little time frame, somebody had made a quick lane change and stopped in my lane. And because my buddy and I were both turned and looked, neither of us saw what was coming. My foot was still on the gas when we hit him going 35 miles an hour. And the collision was so significant that my engine of my car was sitting in their back seat. It had crunched all the way through their rear bumper, all the way through their trunk, and was sitting in their back seat. Not detached from my car, but just we were so merged together. And I remember shutting off the car, and I remember like just saying no so many times, like no, 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 oh my gosh. And I look over and my buddy is gone. And I'm starting to panic. I start calling out his name, and then I see him coiled up like a cat down where your feet go. And he's unresponsive. And so I get out of the vehicle, and I remember opening the door, getting out, and just, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And I remember approaching the driver, and he said, hey, didn't you see my signal? And I said, hey man, I didn't even see you. Where'd you come from? And he said, well, I was in that other lane, but I made a quick lane change over, but I was signaling the whole time. I don't know how you didn't see me. And I said, is everybody okay? And they said, yes, everybody's okay. And then I remember him looking up at my forehead and saying, and how about you guys? Are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And he looked at my forehead again and he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And so I said, but I need to call my dad. Like, I need him. I need help. And I got to have him come pick me up because I got to go to basketball practice. And he looks at my head again and he goes, I don't think you're going to basketball practice, man. And then he said, was anybody else in the car? And then I'm like, oh crap, my best friend, where is he? So I went back to the car. And while I'm heading back to the car, I keep wondering, why was he looking at my head? And so I bent down to look in my rearview mirror, my side mirror, the reflection of in the window and then also into the mirror. And I remember looking into the mirror, and then I quickly looked behind me like, what the heck, who is that? And I looked, and I did not recognize who was in the mirror because the guy in the mirror had blood all over his face. And it was me. I was covered in blood. And no wonder this guy was like, are you sure you're going to be okay? And then I came around to my buddy's side, and I opened up the door, and he started to kind of groan. And then that quick, ambulances swooped us away and took us to the hospital. And, well, actually, excuse me, let me back up and say, when the police officers arrived, they said, who's the driver of this vehicle? And I said, well, I was the driver of this vehicle. And they said, no, you weren't. And I'm like, yeah, this is my car. This is my Datsun wagon. Yeah, this is mine. And he said, no, there's no way you were the driver. And I'm like, why? He goes, have you seen the car? I'm like, yeah, I've seen the car. What do you mean? And he goes, look at the car. And I turned around and I looked at the car, and it was just smashed beyond recognition. You could barely tell what it was. And he goes, you're telling me you were in that driver's seat? And I said, yes. And he goes, how'd you even get out of there? And I looked again at and it was just crunched. Like, I have no idea how, but I distinctly remember opening up the door and getting out. And he said, is there anybody with you? And I said, yeah, my buddy, and he needs help. And he goes, well, looking at my forehead, I think you need some help too. You weren't wearing your seatbelt, huh? And I'm like, no, I was. Because I always wore my seatbelt, right? And he goes, no, come here. And he came over and he pointed to the front windshield, and it had cracked glass in the shape of a head. And they call it a head plant. And it's a sure sign that you weren't in your buckle, because if you're in the buckle, you don't hit the windshield. And there was actually 2 head plants. And he goes, and your buddy wasn't in his seatbelt either. And I was like, holy moly, we always wore our seatbelt. And then we get whisked away to the hospital, and we're treated, and I had a hole in my head. They had to staple my skull back together. I think it was nine staples in and about 18 staples out. And so it's an awkward sound to hear the staple on your head. Cha-ching, 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 like what kind of paperwork you got going up there. And needless to say, I missed the second day of my tryout because I was in the hospital. And I had glass embedded all over into my head. I had shattered. I had ripped my knees. Some gaping holes in both my knees where they hit the dashboard. And so obviously I couldn't finish trying out. And that was tough. Not only because I wrecked my car, but my whole goal and dream was to play my senior year. And we were going to head to state, and they passed. I didn't make the team. They knew I would be out for 6 months, and they're like, by then the season will be over. You're welcome to be around the team. You're a team leader. And that was a tough blow for me as a 17-year-old kid. So anytime a lesson comes around that's talking about following distance, it gets my attention. Because I remember back when I was a 17-year-old boy who I thought had good following distance, but because I looked away from the front view and somebody moved into my lane and stopped, I went into the back of them. And that's I got a ticket that day, and the ticket said following too close. And I got in my first crash that day, my first and only crash of my whole entire life that day. So it was a rough day. And later that week, finding out that I didn't make the basketball team my senior year, it was kind of a game changer for me. So We learn from our mistakes, and that crash changed me. And I know it seems weird to say this phrase, but to experience a crash firsthand changes your whole perception of driving and the risk level associated with driving. And so even though a driver's license is incredible, and it is incredible, you guys are going to love having a license, but it comes with some massive responsibility. And if you take your attention off the road for a split second, things can change. And if you don't notice that change, crashes often occur. So I hope that you can learn from my lesson, right? Warren Buffett said we must learn from mistakes. That's a part of our lives. But they don't always have to be our mistakes. So learn from my mistake. And that's the value of this story. Now, there's 3 videos that you're watching, mine included. There are actually 4 with mine included. And I want you to be able to talk to me about what you are willing to do. What kind of habits are you going to create in your driver's seat that are going to save you when it comes to aggressive driving? What are you going to do to control your speed? What are you going to do to control your following distance? To manage time and space? Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.